Um, I want to introduce myself quickly. I have worked at Comox Valley Transition Society for, I actually did my 25th anniversary in January. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the society, we do quite a number of things, mostly revolving around women who are experiencing violence or addictions, their children and their families, including some programming for men. So we do quite a range of things, but I've been at that for quite a long time. I want to just quickly introduce my co-worker, Lisa, as well, and we will both be here until 2:30 today. If you have questions about our programs, either of us can answer those. I am really honored to be asked to speak because I think that military members have some of the toughest jobs imaginable, and especially after listening to Kim this morning, I'm even more convinced that military spouses are true heroes, dealing with uprooting the family, regular moves, having to find new friends, make new connections. Really, it's amazing, and I want to just really acknowledge the strength and resiliency of military families. I've seen it in our work over the years, and there's no question in my mind that that's the case. And I want to acknowledge the MFRC for having a conference on separation and divorce. Those are difficult conversations to have, there's no question. But they are very necessary conversations to have, and it's important for anyone, whether you're in that situation of contemplating separation and divorce, or whether you are supporting a friend or a family member, or you're supervising somebody, it's important to have good, solid information. And I know that Tony provided lots of good information this morning. What I was asked to cover off was, what about when there is domestic violence or intimate partner violence in the family? Because that can be a real complicating factor, obviously, for any family that's experiencing that, but it can be a complicating factor in separation and divorce as well. So that is what I'm here to talk about, and about doing what we can to make sure that everybody is safe through the process of separating or divorcing. So I just want to say first that I acknowledge that the content can be triggering. I'm really happy that there was a crisis team here today, that they're available to you, and I encourage you to make use of their services if you're feeling that you need that. I also, sorry, I lost my train of thought here for a second. Yeah, that's okay. Okay, so what I want to do quickly first is just clarify, when we talk about intimate partner violence or domestic abuse, what are we actually talking about? What might that look like? What are some kinds of abuse? And I really hope that some of you will have questions and comments as we go through this, because I like it to be kind of interactive if it can be. So what are some kinds of abuse that might be experienced in a relationship?
Physical.
Physical. Emotional. Yeah, name calling, put downs, put kind of comments that kind of go to the core of the person that are really hurtful. What else might that look like? Physical, emotional, psychological, yeah, kind of messing with the person's head. Financial, controlling the finances so that it's very difficult for the partner to manage what he or she needs to be able to do. And did I hear sexual from somebody? Yeah, I did. Okay, so maybe forcing acts that the person is uncomfortable with. And another one that isn't often thought about, but is actually really important to consider, and maybe especially in the context of military families as well, is isolating the person. And if somebody is experiencing abuse in a relationship and they are isolated from support networks, that is a risky situation for that person and very difficult for them psychologically, emotionally, etc. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But on that note, I really appreciated what Kim talked about around building community for military families, because I think community is one of the things that helps to keep any of us safe. If we have people we can rely on who are noticing what's happening in our families. I was asked to speak also briefly about kids when there is abuse between the parents, the impact on kids. It does have a big impact on kids, and kids, especially smaller kids, tend to think that they're responsible for what happens in the family. So if I hadn't broken that dish, Dad wouldn't have hit Mom, or Mom wouldn't have sworn at Dad. They tend to take a lot of responsibility. So when there's abuse in the family, that's a really big weight on a child who is feeling like, oh, I caused that. What we see with kids where there is abuse in the family is real difficulty concentrating at school, real difficulties in peer relationships, embarrassed to have friends come home because the friends might witness something that the child doesn't want them to see. A lot of issues with self-esteem, feeling badly about themselves. It is genuinely really hard on kids, and it puts kids at risk of repeating those behaviors as adults, of either being victimized or perpetrating abuse. So we want to try to intervene with kids and help kids where there has been abuse and the relationship has ended. It's really important for the child to get support around what happened, and to make sure that that child isn't carrying a feeling of responsibility into the future. For some children, I think we all have this sort of dream about relationships, that they're going to last forever, hopefully, that this child who you brought into the world is always going to have the same parents. For some children, divorce is actually a relief. And that was something that I learned over time, witnessing the journeys of a lot of families coming through our services. Obviously, for many children, there's a lot of grief attached to separation and divorce, but for some of them, it is a relief that the drama, the tension, the stress in the household, that's gone now, that there are two separate households. Obviously, it can still carry on when the parents are exchanging the kids, if they haven't done the work that I know Tony talked about this morning, of figuring out how to co-parent without those kinds of stressors. But sometimes it is a relief. And by the way, I meant to mention at the beginning, full disclosure, I was divorced 25 years ago, and it was a very hard and painful time in my life. For the last 15 years, I have been remarried to a wonderful partner who really is my very best friend. So I think 25 years ago it would have been difficult for me to imagine that the future could be bright, but it definitely improved. So something I'd like to talk about at this point is the cycle of abuse, because it helps us to understand the dynamics. So, this, I hope you can see this from the back. It's basically a circle. And we're going to think about a couple getting together, and when they first meet, what's happening in their relationship with each other? How are they interacting? Honeymoon phase, yeah. How's everybody behaving?
The best behavior.
They're on their best behavior. right? And I imagine that probably everybody in this room has fallen in love with somebody at some point. And rose-colored glasses, I mean, we were really enchanted by this person, and we are both putting our best foot forward and behaving very well, because there's something about falling in love that really calls out the very best in us, I think. So here's this couple, they've gotten together, and over time, they're living together, or they're married, and they are in the honeymoon phase. How long can you keep up a honeymoon? It all depends. But let's suppose they've been in honeymoon phase for a while. But stuff happens in life, right? We can't keep up that honeymoon state forever. What are some of the stressors that might happen in a military family? I'm actually hard of hearing, so I need you to yell. Thank you. Okay, postings.
Deployments.
What was that?
Deployments.
Deployment.
Courses.
Okay. Sorry, somebody yelled out one or two things.
Courses.
Courses? So going away on a course?
Some of our courses are 6 months, a year.
Yeah. PTSD. How about coming back from postings, deployment, courses? Reintegration, okay. Moving.
Special needs children, dealing with the family.
Yeah. So, in the military, you have a lot of particular stressors that don't necessarily exist as much in civilian families, but you also have all the stressors that any of us have, right? The dog needs an operation and it's $1,000 vet bill, right? Or the basement floods, or the car breaks down and it's going to be a big expense. Or maybe you've got kids and he's got kids, or you both got kids and your kids hate his kids, but you're all under the same roof together. You know, there are all kinds of things that can happen that cause stress in a relationship. Now, what do you think is going to happen if one or both of the partners don't have very good relationship skills or good communication skills? Conflict, yeah, conflict. So, and conflict could look like, somebody gets hit. It could look like somebody gets called a name. It could look like something much more serious than that. In a relationship where people have good communication skills, good relationship skills, what are you doing through these, when these stressors are happening?
Communicating.
You communicate, you're talking to each other, you're working some things out. If you drive the kids to school in the morning, I can get supper on when I come home and we can make this work, right? That kind of negotiating can happen in a healthy relationship. In a relationship where it's not healthy, where one or both partners don't have those kinds of skills, you might end up with abuse happening. And it could be relatively minor or it could be quite serious. So, I'm going to talk here in terms of male partner, abusive to female partner. I am absolutely acknowledging that sometimes it works the other way. There is no question about that. Sometimes women are abusive to men, We know from the statistics of abuse that women are more likely to be hurt more severely and are more likely to live with a higher rate of fear. But we totally recognize that there are exceptions to that, and sometimes it goes the other way. But for the sake of simplicity, because I find it awkward to keep popping back and forth with pronouns, and I work with women, I'm going to talk about it that way. Supposing that something, there's been a lot of stress, there's been an abusive incident, and the woman leaves. And I will talk about our services and what a person in that situation might do. But supposing the woman leaves, so she's left, what do you think might happen that might draw her back into the relationship? What are some of the things that might bring her back again? Finance. Absolutely. In this province, as in most of Canada, if you don't have your own income and you're looking at going on income assistance through the province, that's actually pretty dire. It's very little money. Finances could bring her back. What else might bring her back?
Lack of support.
Lack of support. Yeah. Yeah. What else? The children? Did I hear that? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely the kids. Because again, you know, probably most of us when we had our kids, we had that dream that we would be together as a family and that they would have two parents growing up, the same two parents. So that's a hard dream to let go of. Plus the kids can sometimes put a lot of pressure on a parent to return to the relationship. The kids want to go back. And there may be a lot of guilt around the kids also, because if you've been able to provide some things to the kids, like maybe it's skating lessons or ballet or something, and now you've left the relationship and you can't do that anymore, that can leave the parent feeling very guilty. What else might draw her back?
Promise of change. Promise of change.
Promise of change, yeah. Absolutely. I promise this is the last time this will happen. I promise this time I really will go to counseling. Promise of change for sure. Oh, you know, that's a big one. Fear of being alone. Yeah. What else?
Pressure from family.
Yes, family pressure. For sure. You made your bed, you lie in it. We've probably all heard that expression somewhere along the way.
Fear of deportation. It's a
Yeah? Yeah, fear of deportation. It may also, another one is fear around the partner's mental status if she leaves. He may actually threaten suicide because she has left, and that will draw her back. This is a pretty good list, and there are probably as many reasons as there are individuals as to why she would go back. The reason that I'm showing you this is that what often happens is that she will go back, and there may or may not be kind of a honeymoon period again, but often there is, where things settle down for a while. And then the stressors, of course, are always there, but something comes up, and once again, there's this abusive situation. She may leave again. You may see this going for quite a while. So it's just important, I think, for us to have a little bit of a sense of what those dynamics look like, because any one of us might have a friend or a family member who is in this kind of situation. And when you have a friend or family member like that, it can look really confusing, like, why does she keep going back? Why isn't she leaving for good? It can be very confusing. So I think it's important to just understand that. One of the big reasons why she might go back is isolation. Not having a support system. So Kim spoke so brilliantly earlier about the importance of those support systems for military families. And for anybody who is in this kind of situation, I would say that a support system is what's going to help to keep people safe. In your handout packages, there is a handout that talks about safety planning and sort of what are the elements of a safety plan for somebody who's looking at leaving. But I think safety planning has to include community. It has to include other people who have some sense of what's going on and are willing to be supportive.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Is there anything that we know in particular that's the same or different for same-sex couples when it comes to domestic violence?
No, it's no, same-sex couples, absolutely. You can be looking at exactly the same kinds of dynamics. So thank you for that question. Yeah, that's important to understand as well. Abuse does not always end with a separation or divorce, and so it's important to get help if that's continuing for the sake of the kids as well as both partners. Are there any, I'm going to move into what our programs are, but are there any questions or comments at this point? Not so much.
How do you approach a situation where, standing back as a professional, you can see somebody's choice to go back is crazy, but you think that they're about to make that mistake in your eyes. What's your role then? Are you the objective counselor to get it up? Do you support them in their decision regardless? How do you approach the situation?
So where you see that somebody is going back into the relationship and you think that's a really bad decision, what is your role? Okay, so for me as a staff person at the Transition Society, my role is to make sure that that woman has the information she needs about resources, about services, that she knows she can call our crisis line, to do safety planning with her. If something comes up in the future and she needs to get out fast, how is she going to do that? And to be completely non-judgmental about her choices. Because if I make any judgment about her choice, she's not going to come back to our services next time when she maybe needs it even more than she did this time. So I need to come from a place of having a really deep respect for her ability to make the choices that are right for her, even if I don't really understand that choice. As an individual, and I have had people in my personal life who have been making what look like really bad decisions about going back to relationships. As an individual, I would say that my role is to look after myself, do the best self-care that I can, and just give that person a message that if they need me in the future, I will be there for them. That I don't understand the choice they're making, but I understand that it's their choice and I will be there if they need me later. So, and I think that's all we can do. None of us can go in and rescue somebody from a bad relationship. We just can't. You know, the dynamics of every relationship are so complex and none of us really gets it because we're not in that relationship ourselves. Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, I just want to talk about our services, and I do appreciate that this is difficult stuff to think about and talk about. But service, it's good to know that there are services. So One of our services is a 24-hour crisis line. And that crisis line is available to any woman who's in an abusive relationship and wants to call, whether or not she's thinking about leaving or has left. It's also available to friends, family members, neighbors, people who are in abusive relationships who are worried about those people. We actually do a lot of support of family members, particularly women who are in abusive relationships, just because they need a place to talk about what's happening and they need some support. So we have the crisis line. We have Lilly House, which is a transition house, so a safe shelter for women and their children who are leaving abusive relationships. We have housed a number of military spouses over the years at Lilly House. We have women's counseling, and I know that you have excellent counseling programs at the MFRC. Sometimes people want to get off the base to access counseling. And I should say that everything that we do is free of charge, and everything that we do is confidential. So women's counseling, we have child and youth counseling. And that is for kids where the parents are no longer, okay, let me rephrase that, for kids who are no longer in a situation where abuse is happening. Because if they're still living in a family where mom or dad is abusing the other parent, and they're coming to us and learning some of the key messages about violence not being okay, we could be putting the child in a dangerous situation. So we're not able to see the kids while they're still in that situation. We see them after that has ended. And I would say that we see kids and teenagers and their caregivers right up to about age 19, and we see the whole spectrum from kids who have witnessed some pretty serious stuff to kids where the parents have separated, but there's still a high level of conflict between the parents, a lot of arguing and kind of going back and forth, and the child feels caught in the middle of that. We see those kids, and we see their caregivers, and sometimes that can be quite helpful in kind of bringing down the drama and the conflict between the parents. We have Triple P, which is, Elisa, help me, Triple P?
Positive parenting program.
Positive parenting program. And again, in your handout, there is a flyer for the Parenting After Separation and Divorce group. And again, these are all free programs. And it's a good place to come and learn the skills that sometimes we need to learn at that point after a separation or divorce. Both parents can't come to the same group. Only one of the parents can come to any given group, but we run them pretty regularly, so there's opportunities for both parents to attend over time. And we have a bridging employment program as well, which can be relevant for women who are leaving relationships and wanting to move on to higher education or to try to think about accessing employment. And Elisa, my coworker here, runs that program. And I should mention Elisa is ex-military, so she has lots of helpful insights for me into military culture. So those are the main things that I wanted to cover off with you, and I wanted to just leave a few minutes at the end if there are any further questions or comments. Yeah.
Are there wait lists for like child counseling, things like that, or is
For child counseling, not really a wait list, no. The kids get in pretty fast. For the women's counseling, it is currently, I think, sort of 8 to 10 weeks. We do an intake appointment right away, like within a week or so, a woman comes in for an intake appointment, because we want to make sure she's actually come to the right program, right? And then she's put on the wait list and waits a further 8 to 10 weeks to get started on counseling. Are there other questions? Yes?
This whole approach seems really reactive on when things happen. Is there something proactive where we teach couples how to communicate properly? What kind of healthy relationship the condition is? Is there something like that? Because this seems really reactive when stuff already happened.
You know what, you're reminding me that I completely forgot a really important program that we have. But no, we don't have anything that's for couples. And you're right, this is quite reactive, this list. Free couples counseling is really hard to come up with, and that I think is a gap in services, because I think that could be very helpful. I forgot to talk about our men's group. And again, free program. After we had had many years of working with women who had experienced abuse, and it was really clear to us that there were men out there who wanted to have better relationships with their partners, who were not necessarily using abuse in relationships, but felt that they could have a more meaningful relationship with their partner if they, were able to kind of develop some skills around relationship and communication. And so we started a men's group, and again, free service. It meets on Monday nights. There's some little flyers for it downstairs on our table. And it's simply for it's a drop-in group. It's simply for any man who wants to work on relationships, whether that's intimate partner relationship at work, or with extended family, or just his relationship with himself. And there are a number of men attending who are actually sort of in the process of separation or have divorced and are kind of looking at rebuilding their lives and wanting the next relationship to be something different than the previous one was. But there's a whole range of men attending, and from very young men up to older men. So we're very proud of that group, and it's an important one for us. Yes?
Like for the military family, someone who has personal communication protocols. And if anybody's not aware of this, I brought pamphlets, and they're free of charge for the military family, and they're very good. They're prevention based.
Just to add to that, the NFRC, through our social workers, we have a 5 love languages workshop that the couples can come to, and couple counseling is available for some initial counseling sessions.
Another reason. Hi, I'm Molly, I'm a social worker for the Spinal University, and I'm part of
We can't hear.
Oh, sorry. I'll talk loud instead. Oh, no. I'm a social worker from the Spinal University. Hi, my name is Molly. I'm part of what's called a family crisis team, so we collaborate with the MPs, with the moderators, we work as a team to provide education, actually, as a preventative resource. I don't know, I'm afraid, whether you have something comparable, but I do.
Yes.
Whether you have something comparable or not, but there is education as a preventative resource too.
Okay. Anything else?
The
Yes.
transition house itself, is this are all the programs a drop-in base, or is it a referral?
So for the transition house itself, we don't require any kind of formal referral for any of our programs. We do have a women's recovery house, detox and supportive recovery, and that one requires formal referrals. But for our other programs, generally women and men, self Yeah, was that the whole question about referral? Yeah, they're generally self-referrals. Very often it's word of mouth. You know, one woman who's experienced the service suggests it to another, one man does to another. Any other questions? Yes?
For men who are victims of violence, I understand the frequency is lower, and I think there also is a stigma then attached to it. Is there support in the valley for men who are victims?
Very limited. Very limited. There is a counselor at the Comox Valley Nursing Center who is able to provide free counseling for men a couple of days a week. And we just need to do a lot more around services for men in general. I think prevention services and services to support men who are experiencing abuse, the whole gamut. That piece is not well developed yet, I think. Anything else? Okay, well, I want to thank you. And again, thank you to the MFRC for putting this event on today, because these are important conversations.